My name is Diane. I'm 54 years old, and I used to believe that love could survive anything. I'm standing outside a wedding reception hall right now. The music and laughter pour through the doors, but I'm out here in the parking lot. In my hand, there's a white envelope. The words still echo in my mind. Her, she's just the driver. My tears want to fall, but I'm smiling instead. Because the gift inside this envelope is going to change everything. If you've ever felt invisible in your own marriage, you'll understand what I did next. Let me know where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe. Because what happened when they opened that gift, well, it was worth 30 years of silence. I need to take you back 30 years to help you understand how I got here. I was 24 years old when I met Paul at an interior design exhibition in Chicago. I just graduated with my design degree and was working for a small firm downtown. I was setting up a display of fabric samples when this man walked up to me. He had dark hair, confident eyes, and a smile that made me forget what I was doing. He told me he was a civil engineer. He worked for a construction company, but dreamed of starting his own business someday. We talked for 2 hours that day about buildings and color palettes and the way good design could change how people felt in a space. He listened to me, really listened. When I talked about my ideas, he'd nod and ask questions and look at me like I was saying the most interesting things in the world. We got married a year later. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. I wore a simple white dress I'd found on sale. Paul wore a navy suit. We danced to Etta James in a community center hall with streamers hanging from the ceiling. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, and I thought that was all that mattered. Those first few years were good. We lived in a tiny apartment in Lincoln Park. Paul worked long hours at the engineering firm. I was building my portfolio, taking on residential projects, learning how to turn clients' vague ideas into beautiful rooms. We'd stay up late talking about the future, the house we'd buy someday, the business Paul wanted to start, the design studio I dreamed of opening. Then one night, Paul came home with papers spread across our kitchen table, business plans, startup costs, projected revenue. He'd been working on this for months, he said. He had connections, clients who'd promised him work if he went independent, but he needed capital, $75,000 to get started. I had that money. It was my inheritance from my father. He died when I was 21, and the money had been sitting in a savings account ever since. I'd planned to use it for a down payment on a house, or maybe to open my own studio someday. Paul looked at me across that table. "We're partners," he said. "Everything we build is ours. This is our future, Diane. Not just mine, ours." So I wrote the check, $75,000. I watched the number get smaller in my account and told myself it was an investment in us, in our marriage, in the life we were building together. Paul's company grew fast. Within 2 years, he had 15 employees. Within 5 years, he'd built 3 office buildings and a shopping complex. He was successful. We moved to a bigger apartment, then to a house in Evanston. Nice neighborhood. Good schools for the kids we thought we'd have someday, but never did. I quit my job when Paul's business took off. He needed help with bookkeeping, he said, client communications, scheduling, someone he could trust. So I became his unofficial office manager. I'd work from home, answering calls, organizing files, making sure invoices went out on time. But my name never went on any paperwork. When I asked about it, Paul said it was simpler this way. For tax reasons, for liability. Don't worry about it, Diane. You know you're part of this. I met Paul's mother, Linda, for the first time 2 months after we got married. She came to our apartment for Sunday dinner. I'd spent all day cooking. Pot roast mashed potatoes, green beans, homemade rolls. I wanted her to like me. She walked in, looked around our small apartment, and her mouth tightened. "Paul could have married anyone," she said. "I hope you'll prove worthy." I laughed because I thought she was joking, but her eyes were cold, serious. Paul's younger sister Ashley was 14 then. She barely looked at me during dinner. She sat next to her mother, whispering, laughing at private jokes I wasn't part of. When I brought out dessert, Linda touched Ashley's arm and said, "See how she serves. That's what a good wife does." It should have bothered me, but I told myself they'd warm up eventually. They'd see how much I loved Paul, how hard I worked to support him, how much I cared about this family. Sunday dinners became a regular thing. Every week at Linda's house, a big Victorian in Oak Park with a dining room that seated 12. I'd arrive early to help cook. Linda would assign me tasks: peel potatoes, set the table, wash dishes afterward. Ashley never helped. She'd sit in the living room with Paul and their father talking about school and friends and plans. During dinner, the conversation flowed around me. Business deals, family gossip, memories from before I existed. If I tried to contribute, Linda would smile tightly and change the subject. "Diane, dear," she'd say, "could you bring out more water? That's more your level." Paul never defended me. He'd keep eating, keep talking, keep laughing at his mother's jokes. I told myself it didn't matter. This was just how some families were. Traditional, set in their ways. I'd prove myself through action, through dedication, through being the perfect daughter-in-law. 30 years passed like that. The company grew. Paul's success grew. We bought a bigger house, drove nicer cars, took vacations to places I'd only dreamed about as a young designer. But somewhere along the way, I disappeared. Not physically. I was still there, still hosting dinners and attending company events and smiling for photos. But the woman I'd been, the designer with ideas and dreams and opinions, she faded into the background until I couldn't remember what her voice sounded like anymore. Then Ashley announced her engagement. She was 32, marrying a young entrepreneur named Marcus, who owned a chain of fitness studios. The wedding would be in June at a luxury hotel in Lake Forest. No expense spared. The invitation arrived in a cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. I opened it at the kitchen table while Paul read the newspaper. Mr. Paul Henderson, it said, plus guest, not Mr. and Mrs. Paul Henderson, not Paul and Diane, just Paul, with a +1 like I was an afterthought, like I was someone he might or might not bring along. I stared at that invitation for a long time, read it over and over thinking maybe I'd missed something. But no, just Paul's name. When Paul came home that evening, I showed him. "There's a mistake," I said. "The invitation only has your name." He barely glanced at it. "Oh, must be a printing error. You're coming, of course." But his voice was flat, distracted. He didn't look me in the eye. He poured himself a drink and went to his office to make phone calls. I tried to push the feeling away, that tight knot in my chest, that whisper in the back of my mind saying this wasn't an accident. But I'd gotten good at pushing feelings away. 30 years of practice. 2 weeks before the wedding, I went shopping. I found a dress at a boutique in downtown Evanston, navy blue elegant, with a modest neckline and 3/4 sleeves, the kind of dress a respectable woman wears to important family events. I bought matching shoes, got my hair appointment scheduled. I wanted to look perfect. I also bought a wedding gift, a set of fine china, white with delicate gold trim, service for 12, $800. I had it wrapped at the store, wrote a card in my best handwriting. "Wishing you both a lifetime of happiness. Love, Aunt Diane." I called Ashley to ask about the seating arrangements. Just wanted to make sure I knew where to go when we arrived. But Ashley's voice on the phone was distant. I'll check with the planner," she said. "I'll get back to you." She never called back. I tried her again 3 days before the wedding. The call went to voicemail. I left a message. Called again the next day. No answer. I told myself she was busy. Planning a wedding was stressful. She probably just forgot. But that knot in my chest got tighter. The morning of the wedding, I woke up at 6. I wanted plenty of time to get ready. I did my makeup carefully, not too much, just enough to look polished. I curled my hair, pinned it up in a classic style, put on the navy dress, the matching shoes, pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. Paul woke up at 8. He showered, put on his tuxedo, checked his phone while I finished getting ready. You look nice, he said. But listen, I need you to drive today. I was fastening my bracelet. I stopped. Drive. What about the limo service? Mom wants to ride with me and Ashley, he said. Family tradition. You can follow in your car. Family tradition. Linda wanted to ride with Paul and Ashley. Her children, not me. But I'm family too, I said. Paul was adjusting his tie in the mirror. He didn't look at me. It's just easier this way. Mom's been emotional about Ashley's big day. You understand? What about my seat at the reception? I asked. It's handled, Paul said. Don't worry about it. The way he said it. So quick. So dismissive. Like he was telling me not to worry about which trash bags to buy or whether we needed more paper towels. He left the room. I stood there in my carefully chosen dress looking at myself in the mirror. 54 years old. Invisible. But I picked up my purse, put the wedding gift in a bag, checked my hair one more time, and I drove myself to Lake Forest, following Paul's car down the highway, watching him drive away with his mother and sister while I trailed behind like an afterthought. The hotel was beautiful. All white stone and tall windows overlooking the lake. Valets in crisp uniforms opened car doors. A red carpet led to the entrance. Guests in expensive clothes streamed inside laughing and greeting each other. I parked in the lot, carried the heavy gift box across the parking area, my heels clicking on the pavement. The navy dress felt wrong now, too modest, too plain, like I was trying too hard to fit into a world that didn't want me. Inside the lobby there was a registration table. A young woman in a black dress smiled at approaching guests, checking names off a list, handing out table assignment cards. Welcome, she'd say. You're at table 6. Enjoy the celebration. I walked up to her. Hi, I said. I'm Diane Henderson, Paul's wife. She looked down at her list, ran her finger down the names. I don't see your name here, ma'am. My stomach dropped. There must be a mistake. I'm the bride's sister-in-law. Let me check again, she said. But after another look, she shook her head. I'm sorry. I only have Mr. Paul Henderson listed. Around me, other guests moved past, laughing, happy, oblivious. I stood there holding that heavy gift box, feeling my face get hot. Paul, I called. He was 20 feet away, talking to a couple I didn't recognize, laughing about something. Paul. He turned, saw me. His smile faded slightly. He excused himself and walked over. What's wrong? My name isn't on the list, I said quietly. The woman at the table looked apologetic. Paul looked at me, then at her. Then he said in a voice loud enough for the people nearby to hear, Oh, her? She's just the driver. She brought my mother. Just the driver. 3 words. Simple, casual, like they meant nothing, but they meant everything. The woman nodded. I see. Well, ma'am, you can wait in the staff area if you'd like. Through that door, turn left. Paul walked away. Back to his conversation. Back to his laughter. I stood there. The gift box felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The staff area was a small room next to the kitchen. Plastic chairs, a water cooler, coat racks where the catering staff hung their jackets. I could hear the kitchen staff talking dishes, clanking music starting in the reception hall. I sat down on a plastic chair, set the gift box on the floor. My hands were shaking. I clasped them together in my lap, trying to stop the trembling. 30 years. I'd given 30 years. My money, my career, my voice, myself. And I was just the driver. The sounds of the wedding drifted through the walls. The ceremony music started. That classical piece everyone uses. I imagined Ashley walking down the aisle in her white dress, Paul standing proud beside Linda, everyone watching, everyone belonging, everyone except me. Then I heard footsteps, high heels clicking on the tile floor. I looked up. Linda stood in the doorway. She was wearing a lavender suit perfectly tailored. Her silver hair was styled in an elaborate updo. She looked at me sitting there in my navy dress on a plastic chair in the staff area. She walked closer, leaned down, and whispered directly into my ear, "Did you really think you were invited?" How stupid. Her breath smelled like mint. Her perfume was expensive. Her voice was poison. She straightened up, smiled, and walked away. I sat there. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I couldn't stop them. They just came hot and fast, ruining the makeup I'd applied so carefully that morning. I'd been a fool. For 30 years, I'd been a fool. I don't know how long I sat there. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Time felt strange. I heard applause through the walls. The ceremony had ended. Soon they'd move to the reception. Dinner, dancing, speeches, all the things that happen at weddings. And I was sitting in a staff room, just the driver. Finally, I stood up, wiped my face with the back of my hand. My mascara probably looked terrible. I didn't care anymore. I walked out through the back entrance, found my car in the lot, sat in the driver's seat, and I broke. 30 years of keeping it together, 30 years of being understanding, patient, supportive, gone. I sobbed, deep, ugly crying, the kind that makes your whole body shake. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. All those Sunday dinners where I served and smiled. All those business events where I stood beside Paul while he talked to important people and never once introduced me as his partner. All those times Linda made little comments and I laughed them off. All those moments when Ashley looked through me like I wasn't there. I told myself it would get better. That if I just tried harder, sacrificed more, disappeared a little further into the background, they'd finally see my value. But they never would. Because in their eyes, I had no value. I was just the help, the driver, the woman who wrote checks and made phone calls and did the invisible work that kept everything running smoothly. I thought about my $75,000, the money I'd inherited from my father, the money I'd given Paul without hesitation because he'd said we were partners. Partners don't end up in staff rooms. I thought about the 5 years I'd spent doing his bookkeeping, organizing his files, calling his clients, building his business right alongside him while my own career withered and died. I thought about my design degree gathering dust, my portfolio of work I'd never finished, the studio I dreamed of opening, all gone, all sacrificed. For what? To be just the driver. Then I remembered something. 6 months ago, I'd been using Paul's laptop because mine was being repaired. I'd accidentally opened his email. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a file he'd asked me to send to a client, but I'd seen an email from his lawyer. Subject line, company restructuring. I'd clicked on it. I shouldn't have, but I did. The email laid out a plan to restructure the business, remove my name from any remaining documents, transfer everything solely into Paul's name. The lawyer said it was for tax purposes, asset protection. But at the bottom there was a note. This will also simplify matters in the event of any future dissolution of marriage. Dissolution of marriage? Divorce. Paul was preparing to divorce me. He was making sure that when he did, I'd get nothing. Because on paper, I'd contributed nothing. I'd just been there, just the driver. I'd confronted him about it that night. Casually, carefully. I mentioned I'd seen the email. Paul had barely looked up from his dinner. It's just legal stuff, Diane. You don't need to worry about it. Everything's fine. But it wasn't fine. And I knew it. So I started making my own preparations. I'd found a lawyer, a woman named Janet Morrison who specialized in divorce cases. I'd called her from my car parked outside a grocery store, hands shaking as I dialed. Janet had listened to my story. She'd asked questions. How long have you been married? Did you contribute financially to the business? Do you have proof? I had proof. I had the canceled check for $75,000. I had emails from the early years showing my work on the company. I had bank statements showing I'd never received a salary, never been paid for my labor, never had my name on anything. Janet had been quiet for a moment. Then she'd said, "You have a case, Diane, but you need to be smart about this. Document everything. Prepare quietly. Don't let him know you're planning anything." So for 6 months, I'd been gathering documents, photographing papers when Paul was at work, saving files to a USB drive I kept hidden in a box of old craft supplies in the garage, opening a separate bank account at a different bank, slowly transferring small amounts from the household money Paul gave me each month. I'd found a small apartment in River North, 1 bedroom, nothing fancy, but it was available and affordable, and the landlord let me put down the first and last month's rent without Paul knowing. I'd moved things slowly. Photos of my parents, my mother's jewelry, books I'd loved, clothes I actually wore. Little by little, I'd been disappearing from that house, and Paul never noticed. Janet had prepared divorce papers. They were sitting in her office ready to be filed, waiting for my signal. I looked up at the hotel, at the building where my husband had called me just the driver, where his mother had called me stupid, where I'd been relegated to a staff room like I was nobody. And I thought, today is the signal. I stopped crying, wiped my face with tissues from my purse, fixed my makeup as best I could in the car mirror. My eyes were still red, but it didn't matter anymore. I opened my purse and pulled out a white envelope. I'd brought it with me just in case. I'd been carrying it for a week, actually, hoping I wouldn't need it, hoping that maybe, just maybe, I'd been wrong about everything. But I hadn't been wrong. Inside the envelope were divorce papers, already signed by me, already notarized. Legal documents requesting equitable division of marital assets, including the business Paul had built with my $75,000 and 5 years of my unpaid labor. Also inside was a detailed financial report from an expert Janet had hired. It showed the company's current value, $3.2 million. It showed every asset, every property, every investment. And it showed something else. Paul had taken out a loan 6 months ago, $500,000 using the company as collateral. He'd never mentioned it to me, never told me he was putting our financial future at risk. Because as far as he was concerned, it wasn't our future. It was his. The envelope also contained a letter, a handwritten letter on nice paper. I'd written it 3 days ago, sitting at my new apartment trying to find the right words. It was addressed to Ashley. I got out of my car, straightened my dress, took a deep breath, and I walked back into that hotel. The ceremony was over. Guests were moving toward the reception hall. I could hear the cocktail hour music, light jazz, laughter, the clinking of glasses. I walked past the registration table. The young woman looked up, startled to see me again. I smiled at her, a real smile this time, not the fake ones I'd been giving for 30 years. I found the gift table. It was set up near the entrance to the reception hall. A long table covered in white cloth, already stacked with wrapped boxes and envelopes. I placed my white envelope on top. It stood out among the cheerful wrapping paper and ribbons, plain white, with Paul Henderson and the Henderson family written on the front in my handwriting, and underneath, "From Diane, with love." The same young woman from the registration table had followed me. "Ma'am," she said hesitantly, "would you like me to add this to the gift table?" "Yes," I said, "but please make sure they open this one during the reception. It's very important. It can't wait." She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll let them know." I needed to find Paul. One last time. One last conversation. He was at the bar in the cocktail area, laughing with a group of men in expensive suits. Business associates, probably. He had a whiskey in his hand. His tie was loosened slightly. He looked relaxed, happy. I walked up to him, touched his shoulder. "Paul." He turned. Irritation flashed across his face when he saw me. "What are you still doing here?" "I left a gift for Ashley," I said calmly. "Make sure you open it." Paul waved his hand dismissively. "Yeah, fine. Now can you go?" You're embarrassing me. The men he'd been talking to shifted uncomfortably. One of them looked at me with something like pity. I looked at Paul, really looked at him. This man I'd loved for 30 years. This man I'd given everything to. I tried to find something there, some flicker of the person who talked to me about dreams and partnerships and building a future together. But he was gone. If he'd ever really existed at all. Goodbye, Paul, I said. There was something in my voice, something final, but Paul didn't catch it. He just nodded, already turning back to his conversation. Yeah, see you later. I walked through the cocktail area, past the guests, past the flowers and the decorations and the celebration of love that I wasn't part of. I saw Linda near the entrance to the reception hall. She was holding court with a group of older women, probably her friends. They were laughing about something. I stopped. Linda, she turned, saw me. Her expression hardened. What I wanted to thank you, I said. She blinked, confused. Thank me. Thank you for showing me exactly what kind of people you are, I said. My voice was steady, calm. It took me 30 years, but I finally see it clearly now. Her mouth opened slightly. You'll be receiving some documents soon, I continued. My lawyer will be in contact. What are you talking about? Linda's voice was sharp now. You'll find out, I said, and I smiled. Not a sad smile, not an angry smile, a free smile. I turned and walked away, through the lobby, out the front doors, down the steps, across the parking lot to my car. I didn't look back, not once. I drove to my apartment in River North, not to the house in Evanston, not home, because that place had stopped being home a long time ago. I'd just been too scared to admit it. The apartment was small, just one bedroom, one bathroom, a living room with a tiny kitchen area, but it had big windows that looked out over the city, and it was mine. My name was on the lease, nobody else's. I'd already moved most of my important things here over the past 6 months. My clothes hung in the closet. My mother's china sat in the cabinet. Photos of my parents were on the bookshelf. The space was simple but clean, peaceful. I kicked off my heels, changed out of the navy dress into comfortable clothes, made a cup of tea, sat on the couch by the window. Chicago spread out below me, buildings and lights and traffic. People living their lives, moving forward. That's what I was doing now, moving forward. My phone started ringing at around 7 o'clock. Paul? I let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. 5 missed calls. Then a text message appeared. Call me now. What the hell did you... They'd opened the envelope. More calls came in. Linda, Ashley, even Marcus the groom. I turned the phone to silent. Let them all go to voicemail. I sipped my tea, watched the sun set over the city, felt the weight of 30 years lift off my shoulders. At 7:30, I checked the voicemails, just to hear. The first was from Ashley. Her voice was thick with tears. Diane, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Mom told me you didn't want to come. She said you thought weddings were boring. I should have called you myself. I'm so sorry. Please call me back. Another from Paul. His voice was different now. Not dismissive, desperate. We need to talk about this. You can't just leave. We've been together 30 years. We can work this out. Please. Just call me. One from Linda. Her voice was shaking with rage. This is outrageous. After everything we've given you, after everything Paul has provided, you ungrateful, you'll regret this. I deleted them all. I imagined the scene at the reception. Guests seated at round tables, dinner being served. The moment when someone, maybe Ashley or Paul, decided to open gifts. They would have reached for the white envelope, pulled out the papers, the divorce filing, the financial documents, the property division request, 50% of the business I'd helped build, 50% of everything accumulated during our 30-year marriage. Based on Illinois law, about equitable distribution of marital property. The papers included the evidence, the check for $75,000, the emails from when I'd managed his accounts, the documentation of my unpaid labor, the proof that Paul had hidden financial decisions from me, the $500,000 loan he'd never mentioned. And they'd find my letter to Ashley. I'd written it carefully, trying to be honest without being cruel, trying to help her see what I wished I'd seen decades ago. Dear Ashley, I'd written, I'm sorry this is how you have to find out, but I wanted you to know the truth on your wedding day, not as a curse, but as a gift. For 30 years, I believed that love meant sacrifice. I gave up my career, my money, my voice. I thought that's what good wives do. But I was wrong. A marriage should be a partnership, not a prison. Marcus seems like a good man, but watch carefully. Does he respect you? Does his family treat you as an equal, or do they expect you to disappear into the background? Don't wait 30 years like I did. You deserve to be seen, to be heard, to have your name on the guest list of your own life. I hope you find happiness, real happiness, the kind that doesn't require you to become invisible. With love, Diane. I wondered if she'd understand. Probably not right away. She was young and in love, and it was her wedding day. But maybe someday, maybe years from now, she'd remember this letter and it would mean something, or maybe not. Maybe she'd have a happy marriage where her husband valued her and his family welcomed her, and she'd never need the warning I tried to give. I hoped for that. I really did. But I also knew the Henderson family, and I knew the patterns that ran deep in families like that. The way mothers raised sons to expect service, the way daughters learned to compete instead of support, the way love got twisted into control. My phone lit up again. Another call from Paul. I let it ring. The divorce took 4 months. Paul hired an expensive lawyer who tried every tactic to drag things out. They claimed my contribution to the business was minimal. They said the $75,000 inheritance was a gift, not an investment. They argued I'd been a homemaker by choice and deserved only alimony, not equity. But Janet was better. She presented the emails, the financial records, the timeline showing how I'd worked for 5 years before officially becoming a homemaker. The fact that Paul had never paid me a salary or given me ownership despite calling me a partner. She presented Paul's own words in emails to clients where he'd referred to our company, our business, our future plans. And she presented the $500,000 loan Paul had taken without my knowledge or consent. In Illinois, that was financial misconduct, using marital assets without spousal agreement. Paul's lawyer advised him to settle. We met once during the process, at a coffee shop downtown that neither of us had been to before. Neutral territory. Paul looked older, tired. His hair seemed grayer than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just stopped noticing years ago. I didn't know you felt this way, he said. We were sitting across from each other at a small table, coffee getting cold between us. I told you, I said, for 30 years. You just never listened. He looked down at his hands. I thought you were happy. You never complained. I smiled. Not a happy smile, just a sad acknowledgement of how blind we can be. I complained, Paul. Every time your mother dismissed me, every time I wasn't included in business decisions, every time you introduced me as just your wife instead of your partner, I complained in 1,000 small ways. You just didn't consider it complaining because I wasn't yelling. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, the driver comment, at the wedding. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Yes, you did, I said. And that's okay, because it finally woke me up. We sat there for another 10 minutes, not saying much. There wasn't much left to say. The settlement came through in October. Paul kept the business, but had to pay me $1.4 million, 45% of its assessed value. Not quite half, but Janet said it was a good deal considering how long the case could drag on otherwise. I took the money, put half in conservative investments for retirement, used some to buy my apartment outright instead of renting. set aside money for living expenses while I figured out what came next. What came next was going back to design work. I was 54 years old. I'd been out of the industry for almost 30 years, but I still had an eye for color and space and the way light changed a room. I started small. A friend of my neighbor needed help decorating a nursery. I did it for almost nothing, just to build a current portfolio. She referred me to her sister who was renovating a condo. That turned into a referral to a young couple updating their townhouse. Within 6 months, I had enough work to call myself an interior designer again. Within a year, I rented a small studio space in Wicker Park. Just a single room with big windows and a desk, but it was mine. My name was on the door. Diane Fletcher Interior Design. I'd gone back to my maiden name, Fletcher. It felt right, like reclaiming a part of myself I'd lost. I reconnected with old friends too, people I drifted away from during my marriage. Barbara, who'd been my roommate in college, was teaching high school English on the North Side. We met for coffee, and it was like no time had passed at all. We started meeting every Thursday evening, sometimes coffee, sometimes wine, sometimes just walking along the lakefront. She'd been through a divorce 2 years ago. She understood. "You look different," she said one evening. We were sitting at a cafe in Lincoln Square watching people pass by outside the window. "Lighter." "I am," I said, and I meant it. 6 months after the wedding, I got an email. The subject line said, "I'm sorry." The sender was Ashley. I almost deleted it, but something made me click. "Dear Diane," she'd written, "I know I don't deserve your time, but I wanted you to know. I left Marcus. Your letter, it opened my eyes. After the wedding, I started noticing things. The way he dismissed my opinions. The way his mother treated me like I was there to serve them, not be part of the family. The way he'd introduce me to his business associates as his wife, then ignore me for the rest of the conversation. I remembered how you were treated at my wedding, how my mother spoke to you, how my brother called you just the driver. And I realized I was heading down the same path. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I let Mom convince me you didn't matter. You did matter. You do matter. Thank you for the gift. It was the best wedding present I could have received, even if it wasn't the one I expected. I'm staying with a friend now, filing for annulment, starting over. Love, Ashley." I read the email 3 times. Then I wrote back, "Ashley, I'm proud of you. You're braver than I was. It took me 30 years to leave. You did it in 6 months. That takes strength. You're going to be okay. Better than okay. You're going to build a life that's yours, where you don't have to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. If you ever need to talk, I'm here. Love, Diane." She wrote back the next day. "Can we meet for coffee?" We did. The following week, a small place in Logan Square. She looked younger than I remembered from the wedding, or maybe she just looked free. We talked for 2 hours, about marriage and family and the ways we learn to disappear, about finding ourselves again, about the future. Before we left, she hugged me. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being brave enough to show me the truth." I hugged her back. "Thank you for being brave enough to see it." Spring came to Chicago the way it always does. Slowly, reluctantly, then, all at once. Trees blooming, people emerging from winter hibernation, the city coming back to life. I was 55 now, working with a young couple on their first home. They were so excited, so full of plans, arguing playfully about paint colors and furniture placement, making decisions together, compromising, listening to each other. I watched them and felt not jealousy but hope. Hope that they'd build something real, something equal, something that didn't require one person to disappear. In the evenings, I'd sit by the window in my apartment, cup of tea in my hands, looking out over the city lights. Sometimes I'd put on music, jazz usually, the kind my father used to play on Sunday mornings when I was a kid. I'd think about Paul sometimes, wonder if he'd learned anything. Probably not. People like that rarely do. They just find someone else to diminish, someone else to call just the driver. I'd think about Linda too, about the poison she'd carried and passed down to her children, about how some people measure their worth by making others feel worthless. But I didn't think about them with anger anymore, just with a kind of distant sadness, the way you might feel about characters in a book you finished reading and put back on the shelf. I joined a support group for women going through divorce. It met Tuesday evenings in a community center in Lakeview. 12 of us ranging in age from late 20s to early 70s. Different stories, but the same themes. Invisible labor, ignored contributions, the slow erosion of self. One evening, a woman named Patricia asked me, "Do you regret staying so long?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "No," I said finally, because it taught me something important. What another woman asked, it taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I said, that I could survive, that I could start over at 54 with nothing but a check and a USB drive full of documents and build a life that's mine. I paused, and it taught me that leaving isn't giving up. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. The room was quiet. Then Patricia nodded. I needed to hear that. "Me too," said another woman. "Me too," said another. "I don't hate Paul anymore. I don't hate Linda. I don't even hate myself for staying as long as I did, because hate is just another kind of chain, another way of staying connected to people who don't deserve space in your head or your heart. I learned that love, real love, doesn't ask you to disappear. It doesn't require you to sacrifice your voice or your dreams or your name on the invitation. Real love sees you, hears you, makes room for you. And if someone can't do that, it's not love. It's something else. Something that looks like love from a distance, but up close is just control wrapped in prettier packaging. I learned that you can't make people value you. You can't work hard enough or sacrifice enough or disappear enough to finally be seen by someone who's chosen not to look. But you can value yourself. You can see yourself. You can take up space and use your voice and put your name on things. You can drive yourself out of situations that make you small, out of rooms where you don't belong, out of lives that were never really yours. One evening, I was sitting by the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I had a client presentation the next day, a family wanting to renovate their kitchen. I'd spent the afternoon putting together mood boards and material samples. My phone buzzed. A text from Barbara. "Dinner Thursday." I smiled. Texted back. "Yes, that new Thai place." Her response came quick. "Perfect. 7 o'clock. It's a date." I set my phone down, looked out at the city, at my reflection in the window glass. I saw a woman with gray streaks in her hair that she'd stopped coloring, laugh lines around her eyes, hands that had worked and created and built things. A woman who'd lost herself and found herself and learned the difference. I thought about that moment at the wedding, standing in the staff room, hearing Linda's whisper, "Did you really think you were invited? How stupid." And I thought about the white envelope, the gift I'd left. They'd called it revenge. Paul's lawyer used that word in court. This is a vindictive woman seeking revenge for perceived slights. But it wasn't revenge. Revenge is about making someone else hurt. What I did was about stopping my own pain, about drawing a line and saying no more, about taking back what was mine, about leaving a warning for another woman who might need it. It was about freedom. I used to think my value came from how much I gave, how much I sacrificed, how invisible I could make myself for the people I loved. But now I know better. My value comes from me, from the voice I finally found, from the life I'm building brick by brick on my own terms, from the way I can sit in my own apartment in my own space with my own name on the lease and feel peace. They called me just the driver that day, and in a way they were right, because I drove myself right out of that life, out of that family, out of those rooms where I was never meant to be. I drove myself to freedom, to a small apartment with big windows, to a design studio with my name on the door, to coffee dates with friends who actually see me, to a future that's mine to create. And I've never looked back. Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Have you ever given everything to someone who gave nothing back? What would you do in my situation? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that it's never too late to start over, that you deserve to be seen, that your name belongs on the guest list of your own life. Take care of yourselves. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is drive away.